Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Alphabetical Fugazi, the only podcast that devotes an episode each to discussing every song in the Fugazi catalog, from Fuga A to Fuga Z. I'm your host, Ian James Wright. Joining me today to discuss Break from the 1998 album End Hits is working musician Dan Miura, who, among other things, performs the role of Joe Strummer in New York City's best Clash tribute band, Straight to Hell, along with various other music projects. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ian, thanks for having me. I'm excited to do a podcast, my first podcast.
Well, I'm glad to be your first. It's a very special and intimate moment for a young man.
It is,
such as yourself.
And one of my favorite bands, so it's kind of like a nice thing, nice little cherry on top.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about your relationship with Fugazi, your fandom, how you got into them, anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, actually, when we were talking about doing this, I was thinking through it in my head, and I realized it was kind of a big moment in me, sort of like musically, just kind of growing up. It was kind of like near the end of college, and I'd started my first job cooking at this software company in Seattle. And my boss, he was just a music nerd, that's all I can say. He's just like an encyclopedia of music. And, so we're working together every day. And just kind of got into I was really into sort of political music, like The Clash, and a lot of that old British stuff. And he's like, oh, you'd probably really like these guys. They got some deep lyrics and angry. And just fun, there's real diverse music, which is things that I'm kind of into. So yeah, over time, it kind of took me a minute to get into them. I think it's probably because it's one of those things where it's like the catalog is kind of so dense and all over the place that when you get introduced to them, you don't know where to start.
Was this
I don't know if you've had that.
Was this after they had stopped performing together?
Yeah, because when did they stop? Early 2002? Okay, right. Yeah, so this was probably about 2006.
Okay.
So I completely missed the band, had no idea who they were when they were active.
Right, and you had a full and intimidating catalog to dive into, and hard to know where to start.
Exactly. It was like, plop, here you go.
Do you remember which one was your first album that you listened to, or did you listen to songs here and there?
That's a good question. I'm not sure exactly which one. I'm pretty sure I heard Waiting Room, just throughout growing up. I'm sure was familiar with that one. But In Hits was the one that I remember at least really getting into. The other ones, I was sort of okay, I can get into this. But In Hits, it instantly got me just in a second. And a lot of it had to do with Break, because, it's the intro song. And it was mesmerizing, especially we'll talk more about this, but especially when the bass comes in, it was just it just sucked me in. And then I was sold for the whole album. And then from there, I kind of started exploring the other albums.
Yeah, that's one thing that makes it a great opening song, both for this album and as a live song, which they used very frequently to open their sets. So yeah, to introduce the song, we can jump right in. It's the first song on the album End Hits. So I've done a little bit of a deep dive into some data. I don't know if you know about the Fugazi Live Series archive. It's really worth jumping in there. You can buy recordings of shows for about $5. Basically, I've accessed this whole sheet of data that was scraped from the whole live series, so I sort of analyzed what songs were played most, etc., etc.
Okay.
Yeah, but it turns out, their most common opening songs were instrumentals, and I actually emailed briefly with Ian Mackay about this, and he told me that songs like Joe Number 1 and Brendan Number 1 were typical show openers because these instrumentals gave them an opportunity to get a sense of the acoustics of the room with people on the floor, because when you sound check, there's nobody actually in the venue. So they would do that. They would listen to how it sounds with people in the room, make any needed adjustments, and then jump into the rest of their set. But this song, Break, he said was essentially an instrumental, except for the short spoken and sung stanza in the middle. So yeah, it turns out that this is their most played non-instrumental opening song of their career, which is pretty impressive because it came out on their penultimate album. So they played it a ton. I guess they played it 60 times to open shows, according to the data that I have. It's not totally complete, but yeah, it got a lot of airtime, basically.
Cool. I was actually noticing that because I looked up a bunch of as many like live videos I could find just on YouTube, and I noticed that it was mainly an opener, and to me I was just like, yeah, awesome, because you hear it and you just get pumped.
Right.
You're just like, oh, I want more now.
Yeah, one of the nice things, it's interesting that you mentioned the bass coming in. It's one of those songs, and I love it when songs do this, is each member of the band comes in at a different part, so it sort of builds up until you have the whole band playing.
Absolutely.
Right? I guess on the recording, the drums come in, Brendan's playing, then Ian's playing his like sort of chugging riff there. And then, this is kind of an interesting part. I was listening closely to it. You have Joe come in on bass, and then Guy comes in with his lead guitar part. But
right.
there's also this initial before Joe comes in, there's this little descending high melody. Dun, 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 dun. I was trying to listen closely. I couldn't quite tell if that was like Guy's guitar with like the tone rolled down, or I was like, maybe that's a piano.
That was my initial thought too, was a piano.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah.
Here's my theory is from watching live performances of Break, because Guy never plays that part live. So my assumption is they just did a little piano bit in the studio there. So that's my working theory. I'm going to add it to my list of questions to ask the band if I get a chance to interview them.
Yeah, I love that you're in like this dialogue with Ian. I didn't even know that he was...
Well, the thing is,
checking it.
I don't want listeners out there to like flood his inbox with shit. But that's one of the cool things about being a Fugazi fan, because you can email them like on Discord, and if you have something serious to talk about, they'll get back to you. Yeah. So like I said, it adds piece by piece. I guess usually when they played it live, Ian started it off, and then Brendan would join him. So the order would.
That's kind of what I noticed. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, I guess we're starting now.
And anything else you'd like to say about this, just musically?
Yeah, I think, well, it's one of my favorite Fugazi songs, but I also think it demonstrates one of my favorite things about Fugazi. And I bring this up a lot when I'm talking to like bandmates and we're discussing a song or something. It's people that are really good with knowing like where to place their instrument and how to listen to each other. That's my favorite thing. One of my favorite things about the band is they listen to each other. It's not just like four dudes just like turning up to 11 and playing, 5 minutes and then stopping. It's like, oh, maybe I'll leave for this like quiet part, and then the dynamic range is just like so nice. And you have Brendan and Joe that are just such a tight rhythm section. It's like unstoppable, it's just like force of nature. So then it allows those two guitars just to sort of play with each other and kind of like, they kind of mimic each other, but in really different ways. Because, Ian's has such a harsh tone, it seems like, for a lot of the time, like really just tight distortion, but aggressive. Whereas Guy has this kind of like, it's a little more floaty, and he also seems like more different sounds that he kind of brings to the table. So I just love the combination of musicians and how it all works together.
I absolutely agree. Like, this is a great exemplar of what a powerful rhythm section Fugazi was. And obviously Brendan knocks it out of the park every song. Joe, like the bass line on this song is such a great rhythm and such a great melody at the same time. It's one of those bass lines that really impresses me.
And it's simple. It's like he's just repeating the same like 4 lines over and over again, really, which is a lot of his bass lines. It's pretty much like very repetitive, but it becomes this sort of like, I don't even know. It's just like, it's this never ending circle that, again, it just kind of draws you in, and it lays such a nice foundation for everything else.
Yeah. I also totally agree with you about, basically the mix. I mean, not the production, but what the band members choose to play and where they play it. That's something that one of my biggest critiques whenever I see sort of like an amateur band live, and looking back at my own history when I was like a less mature musician playing in bands, like I noticed a lot that people are trying to fight for space, right?
Totally.
And
totally.
it's something too. If you go online, if you look at guitar players, internet forums and stuff, there are always people asking like, how do I cut through the mix? What pedal should I get?
Keep turning it up more. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, man, you're doing it wrong. You have to. People have to lay back. People have to play different enough guitar parts if you have 2 or more guitars in a band. People are simultaneously worried about their band sounding too thin because they're not like playing all the time and they want to be sort of heavy and stuff. But they're sort of working against themselves in a lot of the time, I find.
Absolutely. They're fighting for the exact same frequency.
Yeah.
And there's one frequency, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So, and one other thing, less reverb, guys. I'll just say that to any guitar players just starting out there. If you want to, my personal tip, that's another thing I find in like amateur bands. That's one of their problems. When they're fighting
just
for
so
space,
much noise,
so much reverb on.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent.
Yeah, because these guys have pretty dry tone. I mean, Ian has like a pretty dry tone.
Sure.
Seems like, you know.
Speaking of tone, one thing I like when the lyrics come in, right? Ian delivering the lyrics, all of a sudden the EQ on the drums gets really thin, right? So it's just this sort of like MIDI radio thing, and then totally. After he screams "break," like boom, the heaviness happens.
One of the best screamers of like ever.
Yeah,
like I love like he can sing for sure, but his screams are just like the best.
Especially, as an opener song, it's this thing that you're waiting for, right? That's one great thing about this. There's a long build-up. It's almost like the Jaws theme, right? It's like menacing, and then you're just like anticipating like when the fire is gonna come in, and it's great when it happens. I love that.
Totally, and it's like all tension, like that whole thing leading up to it is just tension, like nothing resolves,
right?
And it just it puts you on edge, and you need that release.
Tension and release, that's what it's all about. Want to talk about the lyrics?
I'm looking at them right now because I was hey, I should look them up.
It's short enough that I can quote the whole thing here. So it goes,
go for it.
Can't ask for more, so why unfulfilled? We take apart everything we build. Had it right here, now it's gone. On and on, break. So yeah, you have any initial thoughts on that?
Well, it strikes me as a very Ian lyric, meaning you can sort of interpret it as you like. It's probably heavier than I may think he's going for. I feel like he always has something in his head that he's trying to get across. But I don't know. Maybe it's kind of like he does a lot of these like existential observations of the world. It seems like, especially super modern world, and how it's just things just get weird, you know. And he just kind of lays it out, but I feel like he doesn't like push his point so far. He just like, look at this. He's almost like a lawyer. He just like lays it out. He's like, hey, we got all these things happening. That's how I see it. That's a very
interesting way to put it. I like that. Yeah, the first line, can't ask for more, so why unfulfilled? That's that might be a reflection of modern life. Although it's also a pretty old concept, right? First of all, I think we should say Fugazi is a good example of a group of people who have been fulfilled with less, right? They've turned down notably like major deals and like merchandise opportunities. Like they don't care that they're leaving money on the table.
Right.
They found fulfillment in their career in sort of putting their music out there and themselves out there in a way that they were comfortable with, and not compromising that in the name of earning a little more money.
Yeah, they always went music first. That was their whole ethos, you know. Yeah.
So here's a little interesting parallel I pulled, right? There's a 2018 Purdue University study. It's published in the Nature journal Human Behavior, and it uses data from the Gallup World Poll. So basically, they're trying to find out what amount of money it is that makes people happy, I think they looked at two things, right? Just the emotional well-being, but also how people evaluated their own lives on the whole. So, a little brief quote here. Globally, we find that satiation occurs at $95,000, this is like annual income, for life evaluation, and $60,000 to $75,000 for emotional well-being. However, there is substantial variation across world regions, with satiation occurring later in wealthier regions. We also find that in certain parts of the world, incomes beyond satiation are associated with lower life evaluations. So, like, that's pretty interesting, right? The idea that, I mean, obviously, like, lots of people would love to, be earning $100,000 a year, but the concept that earning more than that would be worse for you.
Yeah, start reversing it. Yeah,
it's almost impossible to wrap your head around, right? Like, so I'm a science guy. I'm a believer in science. When the experts tell me something, I'm gonna credit that. I'm gonna listen to it. But like, knowing the above, what I just said, like, if I came to you and I asked, hey, would you rather make, all other things being equal, $100,000 a year or $200,000 a year? Even knowing that science says you're going to be less happy with $200,000.
That's right.
Who's going to choose less? I mean,
that's right. Yeah.
And that scales up, right? 1 million, 500 million, etc. Like, when do you start to say no, even knowing that science says you're going to be less happy? It's like, it's almost impossible to actually realize. And, I think that's a big part of what we're seeing with this sort of larger cultural awareness, at least in America, that this sort of the 1% is getting out of hand in this country.
Yeah. That's a super interesting parallel that you went there.
I mean, also,
but it makes sense though, because I feel like this is the things that I just imagine myself sitting in a band meeting with these guys, and I feel like this is the conversation that they would actually talk about. I think they actually are that nerdy and that, like, sort of inquisitive of the world. I think they actually sit down and have these conversations, which is pretty rare for you think of a typical band, you're like, let's get some beers,
Yeah, that's all the bands that I've been in. Very, very beer focused conversations.
I mean, me too. I'm not trying to.
But I mean, also, it's not this sort of like niche observation, because when you think about it, there's so many great, like, tragic movies, TV shows, etc. about people, I mean, generally men, let's be honest, but people who just, like, seek more and more money or power, and their lives are undone by it, they're ruined by it. Like The Godfather, Citizen Kane, Breaking Bad.
Yeah, I was gonna say Citizen Kane.
Like, going back to, like, Macbeth, the tragedy of Macbeth. It's all about these people who like, they can't stop with what they have. They just seek more and more, and it doesn't turn out well for them. So this is a song that really sort of taps into that classic trope, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, and kind of amazing in 4 lines.
Yeah.
Just a few seconds of some lyrics, and he's pretty much got to his point pretty quick.
There's more, Dan. I have more. So,
of course you do.
We have the line, "We take apart everything we build." I think that one for me resonates even more than the previous line, right? I think that's central. That line pops into my head at random times in my life. Are you familiar with the concept of the Tibetan, like, sand mandala?
The ones that destroy?
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's this using colored sand. These people who practice Tibetan Buddhism and do this sort of thing, they make this incredibly intricate sort of like sand drawing. I guess I'm not completely informed about this, but I think a mandala is supposed to represent the universe and there are various circles and parts of it, but it's just incredibly complicated. But basically, as soon as they finish this thing, they just destroy it ritualistically. They sort of like wipe the sand away, and that sort of symbolizes the impermanence of things, the transience of things. So that's one of the things that comes to mind. But it's also like, that's not the only art form like that, right? It's, if you build a sandcastle, right? If you do art with sidewalk chalk outside when it's going to rain, right? You make ice sculptures, you like build a house of cards even, or even like, icing a cake, plating a gourmet dish, stuff like that. You're engaging in a creative endeavor, knowing that, even if you don't personally dismantle them, the act of creating them is like inherently haunted by the knowledge that they're going to be destroyed almost immediately.
Right.
So doing stuff like that is, it's an interesting pursuit, because I think in a lot of other creative pursuits, we sort of flatter ourselves that, it's like, oh, my art's gonna last, right? It's, if you're doing a recording with a band, or you're writing a novel or something. You're like, yeah, it's gonna be there forever. It's gonna go down in the history books. But
yeah, that's what you're thinking.
yeah, but in reality, that's rarely the case, right? In reality, it's like it's an enormous success if your art lasts even into the next century.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
When you think about how rarely that happens, like I always think, I mean, so many people. You think about the sort of the young generation today, Generation Z or whatever. Like, do you think how much they know about Frank Sinatra or even Elvis or something, right? It's obviously those are examples of people who, we know who they are culturally, but how many people are familiar with their work?
Yeah, and I think also culture just morphs. It's
Sure.
it's not a stable. It's a constantly moving thing, and so even if these things do disappear, because we always have these, it's the cyclical nature as well. Elvis is going to come back in 10, 20 years. All of a sudden people are going to think, oh, this is the coolest thing ever, and
Yeah.
it's interesting how it's like no one controls it, no one owns it. It's just this sort of abstract thing that exists that everyone contributes to or takes from.
But there are also some things that I doubt they're ever going to come back. Like, okay, here's another example. Jimmy Durante, right? I don't know have you even heard of Jimmy Durante?
No, I have not.
So he was like one of the biggest stars of the early 20th century. He was like a comedian and actor and stuff. But like, how many people our age even can name a single thing he did or said? Like, it's gone. People our grandparents' age, he's probably like huge in their minds. But to us, it's like, it's gone, man.
Yeah.
His creative work, it was great at the time, but it was temporary. So yeah,
I mean, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, it's got to be crazy to be at that level, the Elvis level, where people just know that name for generations. That's kind of insane, I guess, since because there's so many examples of when that doesn't happen.
Yeah, but I guess it's all about having a positive attitude about that sort of thing. Just acknowledging that, probably your art won't last and that you're okay with it. You're making it for the moment. And that might be a point of the things like the sand mandala. It's you're sort of meditating on that as you create that kind of art, which I think is nice. So basically, what I'm saying, you can, I think, take that positively. That line, "We take apart everything we build." It sounds a little bit negative and cynical, but there is a way to interpret it in a positive manner, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's. A lot of the lyrics of Fugazi, big reason why I like them is everything's interpretable.
Yes.
I mean, you're proving it with your podcast. It's like, you're going to be talking about lyrics, all these lyrics, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot of different interpretations to the people you talk to.
Yeah, and I've talked to people already who, a couple of people say, that's not the overarching view that mainstream culture has about Fugazi. I mean, not that mainstream culture has any opinion at all on Fugazi. But,
I know, what do they know about him?
But, there's this idea that there are these anthems, there are these statement songs about social issues, but the majority of Fugazi songs aren't like that. So I appreciate that. I want to bring one more outside thing into that, talking about that line, "We take apart everything we build." It always makes me think of this. So there's this poem, "The Ballad of Reading Jail" by Oscar Wilde. Have you ever read that before? You know anything about Oscar Wilde?
I haven't. I know of him, but I haven't read it.
So yeah, Oscar Wilde, he was actually sent to jail in real life, Reading Jail, for the classic crime of being gay, basically. But so he wrote this poem when he was incarcerated, and basically the poem is about, I don't know if it's literally like true to life, but the narrator of the poem is in jail, and he sees there's this other prisoner who's kept separated from everybody, and somebody else tells him, oh, that guy's like, basically the guy's on death row, he killed his lover, right? So he's going to be executed soon. So the whole poem is more or less a meditation on that. But just to quote a brief section of it, he says, looking at this prisoner, "I only knew what hunted thought quickened his step, and why he looked upon the garish day with such a wistful eye. The man had killed the thing he loved, and so he had to die. Yet each man kills the thing he loves. By each let this be heard. Some do it with a bitter look, some with a flattering word. The coward does it with a kiss, the brave man with a sword. And that line, each man kills the thing he loves, that's sort of a refrain that comes back later in the poem. But that's the line that pops into my head when I listen to Break by Fugazi. It's like, we take apart everything we build, each man kills the thing he loves. Both of those things kind of come to mind. And when I see, when you see tragic real world situations, even if it's not some kind of actual tragedy, like some kind of major tragedy, even something like, when George Lucas went back and added all that unnecessary CGI crap to Star Wars, right? And now you can't buy a copy of the original. You just get this deformed mutant version. I'm like, yeah, man, each man kills the thing he loves. There you go.
Yeah.
He grasped too hard. He tried to do more, and he ended up destroying it. So it's one of those things like finds you can apply to various situations in life.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Yeah, I find the lyrics just to be kind of like a, description of human nature. It's there's a certain truth to it that you can't deny. Yeah.
No, unfortunately you can't. I think that's about all that I had to bring to the lyrics, right? I think I've squeezed a good amount out of 4 lines, right? Yeah, do you have, to give you the final word on Break, do you have any last comments you'd like to make?
Well, I will say that this is one of the first songs that got me to the band, for whatever reason. And learning that it was a typical opener kind of says a lot in terms of that it's like a hook, it's like sent out the fishing rod and hooked me. I feel like that's what it does to the audience. It's like, got me.
I'm there with you. Well, let's go to a section of this show called Ratings.
Do you like me? Do you like me? Do you like me?
If I could ask you to, just purely in the context of Fugazi songs, if you could rate this song on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, like 1 being your maybe least favorite Fugazi song, 5 being your most favorite, where do you think this would fall?
Oh, I'd give this one a 5. It's it's pretty easy for me.
Nice.
And I don't love every Fugazi song. I'm not that guy that's just like, oh, they're all 5s. But like I said, it's short and sweet. It's like 2 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, it's like 2:12 or something. Well, that's a big rating from Dan Miura. As for me, I think I would go 4. I'm trying to be as critical as I possibly can here. It's not quite at the top tier Fugazi songs, but it is fantastic. I agree with everything you said. It hooks you in. It serves incredibly well as an opener to both a live show and an album. It's one of those songs where every musical part is great. The guitars, the bass, the drums. And it adds up to be more than the sum of their parts. Obviously, the lyrics 100%. I get a lot out of. So, yeah, it's a big 4 for me. Time for plugs. Dan, where can listeners reach you if you want to be found online or social media or whatever? Or do you have stuff coming up you want to plug?
Yeah.
Anything?
Well, you could follow me on Instagram. I'm dan.from.earth. And I play guitar and sing in a band called Dry Clean. You can find us on Spotify or Bandcamp. I'm based out of New York. And I also play drums in a band called Shelter Dogs. You could also find us on Bandcamp, Spotify, all those fun things. And then I'm playing tonight in my Clash tribute band called Straight to Hell. We're playing the Knitting Factory. And we're actually doing a Joe Strummer birthday bash. So we're doing a lot of sort of deep cuts from different Joe Strummer projects. And that's about it. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever really talked to you about this. Do you have any favorite Clash songs to play?
Yeah, I'm trying to I do. The hits are a lot of fun because the energy in the room. So you start playing London Calling and Should I Stay, people just start freaking out. But I enjoyed a lot of the sort of the reggae, the chiller songs, Police and Thieves, and like Armageddon Time and Bank Robber. Some of those are fun to play live for whatever reason. I enjoy playing them live. But the catalog's so diverse that it keeps it interesting as you go along.
It's cool to see a tribute band like do the deep cuts. Like I watched the video of you guys doing Julie's Been Working for the Drug Squad. I'm like, yes, I love that song, but it's not one you expect to hear.
Yeah, especially if a band's gonna do like 2 or 3 Clash songs. It's like for sure not gonna happen.
Do you guys have a piano ever, a keyboard?
No, sometimes we've done like some horns, but Yeah, it's hard to organize.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's nice. That's one thing that's nice to have, sort of like a almost modular bands, like where you need 4 people, but if this person and this person can make it to a gig, that would be awesome.
Totally. And also, like, the Clash pulled it off live with just the 4. You know, sometimes they had other people, but
Right.
they do the songs even with, you know, that had keys parts on and stuff, which as just a 4-piece. Just louder.
Yeah.
That's the rule. You just turn it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no,
More reverb.
I've been in a cover band, and we played some of the songs with a little horn section, like a trumpet and a trombone. And man, it just seems like so much better. Like we would do Sledgehammer and actually Rudy Can't Fail.
Yeah, some of those, like, very signature horn lines are hard to mimic, but, you know, you throw in a lot of effects and you make it work. Yeah.
Well, all right, folks. Follow Dan. As for me, you can reach me at fugaziA2Z@gmail.com, and you can join the Facebook group, The Alphabetical Fugazi, talk about Break and any other songs we have coming up. And then I hope you'll join me for the next episode. We'll be discussing Break In. And until then, keep your eyes open.
This is my last